Hey, I'm back with an all questions video. Y'all asked so many good questions. I just don't have enough time to fit them into a single video. So I'll give you a second video this week answering nothing but your questions. Let's dig in. Here we go. Handyman Wooly asks, do you ever remove listings of items that don't sell or remove any items that don't seem to get views? If so, what determines the removal? So that's a good question. I have a pretty large space to deal with my inventory, so I don't care too much about holding on to stuff for a long time, but I do go back in my inventory and sort of clean it up and go through it and check and make sure that this is stuff that is still worth keeping and selling. Here's typically what I do is I just will grab a box off of my shelf like this, and I will take it over and I'll look through it and I will pull up my inventory management system Flipwise and I will check that storage location. I use this opportunity to make sure all of my inventory is correct. If there's not stuff that isn't not listed anymore or that is listed that I don't have anymore. And so it's a good opportunity to just do a double check on your inventory, make sure everything looks good. But then I'll look and see like these things. Okay, I've had this for a long time. This thing was originally listed, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago. I might check and see why it hasn't sold yet. Is it because the sell-through rate has dropped off? Is it because I have it priced wrong? That type of thing. And then if it is something that I just think, this is just not going to sell, this was a bad buy, I should just get it out of my inventory, I will just end the listing and then mark it as donated in Flipwise. And so every few weeks I pick a box and I do this with it, and over time I get through all of my inventory. I don't do it every day or anything. I do it maybe once a month at most. Zach asks, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I put 3 listings for auctions on eBay and 2 of the 3 just didn't pay after winning the auction. What's up with that? I was trying to get rid of consoles and it's taking forever because I have to put in a 7-day auction several times. Yeah, that sucks. That's one of the really bad things about running auctions on eBay is that so often buyers just don't actually pay for the item, and then you got to relist it and rerun the auction. And you're trying to sell a console, it ends up taking 3, 4, 5 weeks just to actually get somebody to bid on it who's actually going to pay for it. Instead, you want to be using buy it nows almost all the time instead of auctions because of that very reason. With buy it nows, you can require immediate payment. There's really 3 rules that I follow about when you should use an auction. You should use an auction on an item if it has low supply, high demand, and an unknown market value. And so low supply means there's not a whole lot of competitors out there competing listings. High demand means there's a lot of buyers that are interested in this type of thing. And an unknown market value means you just don't quite know how to price it. If you try to run an auction for something that has high supply and low demand, you're just not going to get any bidders, or worse, you'll get one bidder and it'll sell for way less than it is actually worth. And if you already know the market value, the best thing to do is just list it at that market value. Otherwise, you run an auction, you're going to go through the whole mess that you're talking about of having to relist it and until you get somebody to actually pay for it. But also you risk just getting less than the market value. And so there are things that I do run on auctions on occasion, but it is not very frequent based on the stuff that I sell. If you have very rare, unique items that are difficult to price and have a lot of interest, people are a lot of interest in them, and there's not a lot of supply out there, run auctions all the time. But if you don't, if you're just selling a console, those things have very well-known market values. They have high supply and they have high demand. So just list it at the right price and wait for a buyer. That way, it'll remove a lot of headaches for you. JT asks, what's your best sale ever in terms of net return? How about a favorite or most memorable sale regardless of profit? That's a good question. Let's check. I don't really know. I don't remember. So I'll just pull up Flipwise here and we'll look at sold all time and we'll sort by net return. The reverse. Yeah, so my most profitable item here is this Swiss-made Atmos clock that I bought for $130 and it sold for $1,224.99 with a net return of $866.02. So I actually bought this from another reseller a couple of years ago who was getting out of the business, and I bought all of his inventory. This was one of the centerpieces of that inventory. I knew it was going to be a valuable piece. And yeah, it ended up, netting $866 on that for my best flip ever. The most memorable one, that's an interesting question. I think, if I'm just going off my gut, the one that comes to my mind first is a book, actually. I had just spent some time on YouTube learning how to identify first editions and first prints of books. And like 2 days later, after I just watched this video, I was at a garage sale and I saw a book that I recognized. And so I, picked it up and I looked at it and I was like, oh yeah, look, it does look like it is a first edition. So I just bought, it was like 75 cents or $1 or something like that. And I get it back to the car and I look it up and I was just like completely floored at what I saw for eBay comps. The book was the very first Game of Thrones, and this ended up being a first edition, first printing of the book. And so I spent like 75 cents or $1 on this book, and it ended up selling in the $600 range, somewhere around there. It was not even in perfect condition either. Had some rips on the dust jacket, and there was some staining on the pages, but even so, it still sold for over $600. I don't have it in Flipwise, unfortunately. This was like 6 or 7 years ago before Flipwise existed, but it was just that sticks out. It was just such a crazy find. I was so lucky that I had learned, a few days prior how to identify first edition books. And then here we go. I still have never found a first edition book that was even close to that valuable, but it was a really cool one to find and super exciting to see it. And that's what sticks out as a memorable one for me. Heather asks, stupid question. What do sales have to do with listing new inventory? I'm super new within the last week, so sorry for a dumb question. There's no dumb questions out there unless they're related to pizza, so no worries. So what does listing new inventory have to do with sales? Well, you can't sell anything unless you're listing things. And so that's the big connection there, is that you just have to be in the habit of listing as much as you possibly can if you want to sell as much as you possibly can. With eBay, it's a little more finicky than that. eBay really likes it when you're an active seller, when you're listing frequently. I often suggest that you come up with a minimum daily number of listings that you can do and stick to that every single day, because eBay really likes that consistency. In my experience, you're more likely to get sales if you're consistently listing versus listing one big batch of items once a month, for example. That's really the connection with listing and sales that I'm talking about there, is just go out and list as much as you possibly can if you want to get a bunch of sales. Dan asks, Justin, I found your channel and I'm enjoying your content. Thank you. I have a question. You mentioned that you do estimated measurements for your items since you do flat rate shipping. Does this cause you problems with respect to when items sell through the eBay International Standard Delivery Program? Does eBay ever give you feedback that you undercharge or overcharge for shipping or penalize you for your gaps in your estimation? That's a super good question. I have often wondered this. What Dan's asking is, when you sell something through the International Shipping Program, you don't actually send it to the end buyer in some other country. You send it to eBay first, they inspect it, they repackage it, and then they ship it off to the end buyer. And so what Dan's asking is what is Dan asking? I've already forgotten. Estimated measurements. So when I list stuff on eBay, I don't put any measurements in there at all. I either build the cost to ship into the list price and offer free shipping, or I do like a flat rate shipping on top, but I don't put any measurements in there at all. Early on, when I was first using the International Shipping Program, I started to wonder, if this sells internationally, how does eBay know how much to charge the international buyer for shipping if I'm not putting any shipping information in there? I don't know what they do. I have no idea how eBay handles that. All I can tell you is that to you as the seller, it just doesn't matter. Having accurate measurements on your items on your listing does not impact the international sale at all in any way. Sometime in the last year, I sold an old vintage Apple monitor that weighed like 50 pounds, and it went to Australia, and I had no measurements or details or weights or anything in the listing at all, and everything was completely fine. And so I don't know what they do. I don't know how. Maybe eBay has their own internal weights and measures associated with listings that isn't visible to the user, but I can just tell you, you don't have to specify anything. You don't have to be accurate there, and it's not going to impact the International Shipping Program at all. Rudy asks, hey Justin, love the channel. Thank you. Yard sale question. How long after the start time of a yard sale are you still willing to shop? For example, if a sale started at 7 a.m., would you still go check it out even if you aren't arriving until 9? I try to get to sales as close to the start time as possible, and I've tended to avoid sales if I couldn't hit them close to start. Would love knowing your Saturday strategy. Thanks. Yeah, happy to share my Saturday strategy there. Obviously, with garage sales, the sooner you can get there, the better, because you have free pick of everything that's available. And the longer you wait, that means the more people that are going out and potentially picking up things that you would have picked up also. I tend to stop going to garage sales right around 10 a.m., mostly just because I'm kind of sick of going. I usually start at 7 a.m., so for me, 3 hours is enough for one day. But throughout that time, I find good quality inventory, and it doesn't really matter. And this really goes back to improving your knowledge of what has value. If you're looking for video games, you're not going to find them after 7:15, just because chances are a reseller is going to go to a garage sale and pick up highly valuable, highly in demand, very obvious things that are good for reselling. Expand your knowledge. The more you know about what has value beyond the obvious, the longer you can extend your time at garage sales and still find profitable items. So I definitely still find profitable items all the way up until 10 a.m. when I'm usually done. Kim asks, I've heard of people using private auctions or low-cost auctions to send items to family and friends and take advantage of the shipping discounts. Is that something eBay might frown upon? That's an interesting question. I've never heard that before. I don't think eBay would frown upon it because ultimately you're giving them money, even if it is a very small amount, so why not? But there's really no reason to buy and sell something through eBay for the sole purpose of getting their shipping discount, because you can get that level of shipping discount in other ways that don't involve having to run things as sales and pay fees to eBay. And that's by using a third-party shipping label provider like Pirate Ship or Shippo. Both of those, and there's other ones too, offer shipping rate discounts that are competitive with eBay, if not better sometimes. There's really no reason you would need to list your items and sell them on eBay just to get the shipping discount, because you can just buy them directly from somewhere like Pirate Ship. Way She Goes Gaming asks, how long does a shipping discount last? Example, eBay gives you a discount if you buy the label through eBay for large items. I usually choose a carrier like UPS or FedEx. When that large item sold, I swear it costed substantially more than was quoted in the discount when posted. This item took a while to sell. I'm curious if the discount became void due to time. That's an interesting question. I think so. What this viewer is referring to is that shipping discount you get through eBay, but you don't get that discount until you actually ship the item. And there's really no expiration on it. eBay just has a deal with all of these carriers where they get a reduced rate for shipping. And if you were quoted some price to ship when you listed it and that price changed over time, that is probably because the weights and measures you used at the time of listing changed from the time when you sold it. Or if it was a really long time, rates do go up. I think Post Office just announced 2 rate increases. It could be that the rates just went up, but there's no concept of your shipping discount expiring that I know of. You get that discount at the time of purchasing the label, not when you list the item originally. So I don't think it would be a case of a discount expiring. Alexander asks, when you delete and sell similar items, will you do that for items with watchers? I've been selling for a couple of years and watchers always seem worth keeping. So Alexander's referring to the concept of ending an item and then relisting it, which is a good practice to do for really old items, to end it and then relist it. It's debatable whether it does anything. I personally think it does help increase the visibility of items in search by ending it and relisting it. But Alexander's asking, should you do that if your items have watchers on them? I still do it even when my items have watchers on it. I don't think watchers mean a whole lot. If I go to my Seller Hub right now, I'm sure that there are listings that are months old that have 50, 60, 70 watchers. Watchers just are not necessarily an indicator of sales. Sometimes it is, but not always. And I sell plenty of things with 0 watchers, and plenty of things sit there with tons of watchers and don't sell. So I just don't think it really matters. I end and relist. Those watchers will come back. And so that's what I would recommend. Not worry about the watchers. All right, Randman asks, hey Justin, love the channel. Thanks. I sell low-end sports cards and I'm curious why a lot of my listings don't get views till after a few days. Or if I do get views, no one buys or sends offers even when I'm competitively priced. Am I doing something wrong? I don't know that you're necessarily doing something wrong, but you do need to understand the supply and demand of the items that you're selling. And so if you have items in your inventory that just aren't selling, you should really check and see what the supply is. Look at that item, search for it under active listings on eBay, see how many other active listings there are out there. That's your competition, that's the supply. And then switch that over to the sold filter and see how many of that exact same item have sold. And that will give you a good understanding of supply versus demand and sell-through rate. So if this item has hundreds of listings and only a couple have sold over the last 90 days, well, it wouldn't be surprising that yours has not sold yet or yours doesn't have any views because yours is lost in a sea of competition and there's not many buyers coming along to buy it. But if you check that and there's not a whole lot listed, but a lot have sold, then that could mean there is something that you're doing wrong in your listing. Maybe your pictures aren't good, maybe your title's messed up, maybe you're missing some keywords. Not necessarily doing anything wrong, but you should just try to understand the sell-through rate of what you're selling. And if something isn't selling, seek to understand that so that you can set your expectations accordingly for how long it'll take to sell. Baiju Bug asks, hi Justin, love your videos. Learn something new on every video. Thank you. My question is, how do you determine how much of your profits you use for new inventory? Do you have a percentage you use from your last month's sales? That's a good question. That's a really hard thing to determine, and it depends a lot on your own specific business. Personally, I do this part-time, and so I'm not using the profits that I make to live off of. If I did, I would need to be a little bit more particular about how much money I spent on new inventory because I might be not able to pay my bills, for example. And so if you're using eBay money to live off of, then you need to be a little bit more careful. You need to understand what your total monthly costs are for your family, and you need to make sure that those things are paid before you're reinvesting any of the leftovers back into new inventory. But if you're doing this part-time where it matters a little bit less, you can do what I do, which is just invest as much as you possibly can back into new inventory. I kind of operate under the idea that I never want to pass up a good opportunity to buy quality inventory. Whether I'm out at a thrift store or a garage sale or doing a bulk deal, I just want to be in a position where I have enough funds in my account, in my reselling account, to where I can afford to make a good purchase when I need to. And that really hasn't failed me so far. I typically keep, a couple $1,000s in my reselling account at any given time. And, sometimes I'll go on a vacation, so I'll pull a lot of those funds out and I'll kind of have to start fresh and build it up. And that does, limit my ability to invest in new inventory. But I don't take a percentage off the top, for example. Wouldn't be a bad idea to just say like, hey, if you take 15% off the top of all the money coming back to you for eBay and set that aside for taxes, and then take another 10%, set that aside for new inventory, and kind of grow a little nest egg of money you can spend on new inventory. I'm not that particular. I just sort of wing it, but you could do it that way if you want to. Ms. Kit Harayat asks, do you respond to buyer messages and provide customer support? How much time does it take? So yeah, I do respond to buyer messages. I do provide customer support. That's another thing too for new eBay resellers out there, is sometimes they don't realize this is ultimately a customer service job. Your ability to provide good customer service plays a big role in your success. However, I don't answer every question that comes at me. In fact, whenever I get questions on items that can already be answered in the listing, I don't go out of my way to respond to these. I have found that the more questions that people ask about a particular item, the more problems I get if they actually buy the item. And so I don't encourage people to buy my items if they have a bunch of questions about them. And I do that by just not responding to them. In fact, check out this feedback that I got just the other day. I thought it was kind of funny. Item received quickly and in good condition. Only disappointing thing is that I sent a question to the seller twice, but heard no response either time. Bought the item anyway, and it was at least glad it was in the condition I had hoped it was. That's because this person asked a bunch of questions that were already in the listing. And to me, it was sending a signal that, well, if you're not going to pay attention to the listing, if you're not going to inspect the photos closely, you're just going to ask these questions. Are you going to have mismatched expectations about the quality of this thing? Typically in that situation, I might block the buyer. I didn't in this time, and they bought it and it ended up fine. But in those situations, I don't answer questions. The amount of time I spend running customer support for eBay is really low. I mean, it's got to be like 3 minutes a day at most. Quit asks, Justin, thank you for all your down-to-earth real content. You're welcome. I feel like you touched on this with the descriptions and in your last video, but early on in my eBay research, I read that the algorithm wants you to fill out as many item details as possible. How important do you think it is to fill the themes and occasions and all that? Is it necessary? So another good question there. Should you spend the time to fill out all of the details that eBay asks you to on a per product basis? This is really up to you. The way I think about it though is, how are people searching for items? Sorry, there's a helicopter going over. So I think about, how are people actually searching for items? If it's an item that is Halloween related, it might make sense to use Halloween in the theme of the item descriptions. Otherwise, I don't fill it out with information unless it's super relevant. And if it's already in the title, I typically don't fill it out in the bottom below. So if for some reason my title, I didn't have enough space to fit the word in Halloween, then I would put it in the theme, in the item descriptions down below. But I don't just indiscriminately add all sorts of keywords and all unrelated things, and just as a way to try to trick the algorithm. And that brings me to a really good point here, which is the best hack for the algorithm is not any sort of fine-tuning you can do to your listings, or manipulating data, or adding extra keywords, or any of that. The best thing that you can do to hack the algorithm is to just buy good stuff. Buy quality inventory that has a high sell-through rate, that has ideally a low supply and high demand. That is the best hack you can get, is just buying quality inventory. If you have items that are not selling, it typically is not because the algorithm hates you. It's probably because it's just not an in-demand item. And so if you're having trouble selling stuff and you're looking around on Google or on YouTube trying to find ways to hack the algorithm to get more sales, I just really wouldn't bother doing that. I would try to channel your energy into improving your knowledge of what has value, of going out and sourcing more often, and trying to buy the best quality inventory you can. Ultimately, that's the most important thing with all of this, is buying high quality inventory. And sure, you need to make sure that your listings are optimized and that those are all table stakes. You got to do them. You got to make sure you have good pictures, good titles, good metadata, good descriptions, all that stuff. But like, I would not worry over those details as much as most people do. Instead, worry about buying good, high quality inventory and let eBay do the rest. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, YouTube thinks you might like this other video of mine, so check it out.